Welcome back to another episode of the ChrisRodMaxShow, or the AI show, where AI meets business and Hypegate fact check. We're back in July today, and while it's summer, but AI is not stopping. We're back in today with my co-host, Chris Rod.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Welcome back. And today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about, I guess, Stargate, which is a project that was announced in January, and they're basically trying to push for extra capacity. Then we will talk about what does that mean for I guess the US, where they were pushing for more AI. Separately, we're also seeing, the deregulation in the US on AI, basically trying to push more US AI outside of the country, while Europe, on the other hand, is working on a compliance that is trying to, I guess, take a slightly different approach, kind of take a little bit more, I guess, steady shot. And we will also look into, I guess, some of the latest models from ChatGPT and the Google Gemini, where they have potentially beat human athletes on Olympiad mets. What does that mean for future corporate R&D? What does that mean for, I would say, research going forward? And lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about Apple and its strategy and its announcement on delaying some of the AI features until next year, because it's still about 5 months to go. I wonder if that's the approach going forward. Cool. Without further ado, let's jump straight in. Let's start off with, I guess, the blockbuster Stargate. So for those who don't know, Stargate is basically a data center initiative that was pushed by both, I would say, the Trump administration. It was also invested by SoftBank to set up a 10 gigawatt facility or data centers for AI processing in Texas, I believe. And now they basically try to push for another 4.5 gigawatt of AI. So I guess my sense is, how is this turning around? Because it's a huge amount of money. There has been a little bit of drama there as well, where Elon Musk came out and said that they don't have the money to actually set this up. So I wanted to get both your takes, specifically on how OpenAI and Oracle is trying to approach this. Not to mention Oracle become a dark horse in the AI race, especially with all the data center setup. So maybe I'll start with you, Rod. Maybe give us a little bit of view on what does that mean with the 4.5 gigawatt extra.
I like to also hear the perspective on, as you're saying, Max. So one of the things with this initiative, it is that in the end, maybe it's more noise than substance, where it's unclear how much is committed. You remember what you were just saying, right? Like Elon Musk saying they don't have the money and so on. So it is here a bit unclear, but what is real is what is happening now between OpenAI and Oracle, right? So where OpenAI is here committing to basically rent resources from Oracle, and then this means that now Oracle also has to invest, because it's not like, let's say, they just have unused capacity somewhere, but rather they need to build these data centers. They need to have the possibility to basically power all that. And that's why also, like, the market is not exactly super happy, where you say, hey, this is a massive deal and it is amazing for Oracle, because you would say Microsoft, Google, and AWS from Amazon, they are the leading players in basically like the compute for rent industry. And then Oracle has never played like a major role, at least from the outside. And landing such a major customer should be like a massive news, driving the stock and interest. But right, what's happening is people are realizing, hey, that means billions of expenditure. There are some calculations that show that they need to spend like 40 billion up to 2028 just to make this happen. And then people are saying, well, this will definitely impact their margins and put maybe like a company under some strains. Here, of course, great for like OpenAI, of course, great for like here NVIDIA and so on. You saw that also, like, the NVIDIA stock went up so after the announcement. But for Oracle itself, is maybe like a bit unclear. And in preparation of our show, I was just looking at just Oracle versus SAP, because for me, Oracle has always been more like a ERP type of company, databases. And it seems that this strategy of focusing from SAP is paying off better than what Oracle is doing. But how do you see that, Chris?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rod, for some of these insights. I'm just trying to picture 4.5 gigawatt of power. What does that actually mean? And it's essentially the energy you need to power over 3 million US households. It's basically the equivalent of 4 nuclear reactors or 50 hyperscalers. I mean, just to like show you the scale of what has been committed in terms of investment. And of course, I think the implication of that is that there's massive bet on AI, maybe even AGI. And I think what we're going to talk about in the next article, just like the compute power you need to do a math Olympiads or any other type of use case just consumes so much energy. And I think that's just a signal to the world that, okay, well, OpenAI is very serious. They really want to, go the AGI route. And so obviously that's where they need this infrastructure there in order to really get to that point. So I think that's one message we can take away from that. I think another one is obviously geopolitically inspired, right? So of course you have the race between the US and China sort of like going head to head on model accuracy, model responsiveness, etc. So of course, that's also a signal towards China that they're now heavily invested and they want to stay ahead of the race. I think, of course, for Europe going the other way, I think it's really a question on like how to position itself there. But yeah, so that's basically what I'm reading out of this. It's like a massive investment. I think, yes, the other side of it is obviously how to invest it. I mean, I saw SoftBank again being involved in this. I feel like they're always involved when it comes to really big sums of money. And I have no doubt somehow they will be able to like manage and somehow find the money somewhere. Maybe the Middle Eastern guys are also chiming in here again. But I think for the world, and really the takeaway is it's going to be massive. And we're going to probably see quite a bit of speed and innovation in the next couple of months.
And to your point here, Chris, what you're saying about so here on one side, staying ahead, but also just what you were saying on the electricity required for that, right? Something is happening with all these data centers, so especially for AI. It is that historically you wanted to be very close to your customer. So for those who work with any type of cloud services, you would choose data centers that are in like in Virginia or like in the Bay Area and so on. So very close to where like the users will be. But then now with all this AI build up, it's not really possible to have massive data centers that are close to large metropolitan areas. You have to put it in the middle of nowhere. Like these ones that Oracle is building, they are like in rural Texas. And this means like many, of course, in considerations for like just the job markets in different regions where historically these regions might be maybe deprived, but also just the whole infrastructure build up. So on where you're saying they're trying to stay ahead of the competition, but the US is not constructing or is not building as many nuclear plants, as much infrastructure as China is doing. So long term, who has more legroom for growing? Well, likely China.
The energy question is an interesting one, right? I was just having a chat yesterday around this, right? There was a spike in energy prices last week here in the UK, and let's say in Italy, and then you can see the lack of investment, I guess, in certain countries in Europe, especially on renewable side, will basically create some sort of scarcity on energy. And I think that happened in parts of Europe as well. I wonder if that will actually kick in once all these data centers are set up, and then the US realized that some of the, I would say, electricity infrastructure is not quite there. I guess my sense is it will take time for that to turn up. If they're building it, they're definitely consuming it. Will they take away the electricity from the people who are actually consuming it? It's a question. The ultimate game here is the electricity, I guess.
I have here an anecdote. So where I was at an event and I was asking just people, how do you work with AI? How do you say ChatGPT and so on? And then one person was telling me, yes. So I'm very becoming mindful of like what I prompt there. I'm trying to make my prompt shorter because I've read that every word that I write on ChatGPT, it uses so many glasses of water and requires so much electricity. So I'm worried about the environment and I'm therefore trying to make the prompts as short as possible.
I think that's a very conscious consumer, I must say. Did she ChatGPT the answer or he ChatGPT the answer? That's the question. Cool. I think just lastly before we turn on, right? Like I think I would just wanted to turn, I guess, a little bit of attention back to what Rod was saying. Like if you look at the share prices of Oracle versus SAP, year to date, Oracle is like up by 40%. SAP is probably like down by 1%, just on share price. And they I think just announced on the earnings and AI as well, like as of today. So it's quite interesting to see that just by associating yourself to some of the largest player, like your share price are jumping. And I guess it's probably clear across the market, right? Like if you don't do anything in AI at the moment, it's almost like you don't get the attention. Therefore, not the money.
But same time, Max, I'm looking at the chart. Like there's something that happened here really in the last few days. That if you look at how it was in solid May, it was at $163. Right now it's 236. So they are called stock. So and I cannot really figure out what led to this jump, right? And I'm not even following the stock that closely, but nevertheless, if you look rather that trend, for example, for SAP, you see rather like a healthy linear growth, whereas here you see a large spike. I don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah. Maybe some people are buying in large blocks, you know. Yeah, it's $126 in what April. Today is like 236, almost double in share price over time. It's yeah, healthy profit, guys. This is not an investment advice.
I want to also to talk about exactly that. If we're comparing here SAP against Oracle, and I remember, so Chris, you also were somehow involved with SAP for some time or something, right? Or maybe getting wrong. But I am curious also here on how these very different companies are approaching AI, where clearly Oracle is going this infrastructure route, and whereas SAP is more about saying how do we add AI to our ERP? They're a pure like SaaS player and vertically integrated. Whereas here with Oracle, sure, they still have their SAP and database businesses, but then really where they see the future is on AI. And I remember sharing with you this super interesting article on how the other large customer that Oracle has for AI is ByteDance with TikTok, where there are some estimations that actually TikTok is one of the largest GPU consumers in the world.
I don't know. I think Chris can jump in shortly. I was just looking at their, I guess, latest HY 2025 announcement. Basically, across the board, everything is up for SAP. When I say everything, it means cloud backlog, total revenue, cloud and software revenue, cloud ERP suite revenue. They're all up. And I just find it quite interesting. Like the share price didn't quite move much, in case trended the other way. Um, I guess maybe it has something to do with what we're going to talk about in the next segment, which is more on the countryside. But I mean, Chris, if you have any insights on this, we'll hear. We're good to hear your thoughts. Um, no, cool. Yeah, it's crazy. Like even free cash flow is up 83%. It's I guess it's looking like pretty solid business. What I take it you just get dividend out of it rather than crazy price jumps. Um, cool. Moving on to, I guess, the latest segment, we're talking a little bit about the US and EU, and you can basically see both countries taking slightly different approach here. With the US, they are trying to push, I guess, AI now over across their border. I think we saw, was it Nvidia basically got, I think, still waiting for the final approval to sell some of the chips over to the US. And we're also seeing, a lot of federal AI permits being fast tracked, reduction in data center approval time, basically pushing, the US AI, sovereign US AI out of the country. Whereas on EU side, we have the EU's AI code that is pushing out and probably begin in enforcement in about 8 days in August 2025. And basically, we're taking more of a risk approach here, whereby if someone breach the code, they can be fined up to 6% of revenue. When I say they, as in corporates. I wanted to again get both your views on this. How is this also ultimately affecting how the world was looking at SAP and Oracle, especially on the share price side? Chris, thoughts on the US AI deregulation versus EU more regulation playing?
honestly speaking, I don't think we see something new here, right? It's definitely different mentalities. And again, we see the US China race to the top, really about digital and AI domination. And I don't know, the EU, I think my hypothesis really on this is that the EU doesn't have the firepower just simply because you have so many fragmented countries that are small in size. Like, I mean, we talk about, Germany with 80 million population being the largest economy, but that, just is tiny compared to the US and China overall. And then you compete sort of like on a regional levels, with France and the UK, with some LLM model development, etc. And I feel like if the EU was more unified, then as sort of like the European Union plus UK, I don't know, you guys have to decide on that one. You could actually be a more serious player in that field. I think when I go back to Germany and I talk to people, I feel like there's a completely different question set in their minds. It's not like what's the latest next use case I can do, or like, what's the latest model, or how can I, are there any equivalent to Lovable that I should try out? Like, there's not this type of curiosity necessarily, but it's more like, oh, I'm not trusting the model. I don't know. I don't want to like, I met a friend who actually doesn't have mobile payment, and she's like sort of like scared of putting her credit card onto her iPhone, basically. So that's sort of like the type of mentality and the barriers I think we do see in Europe. So people tend to be scared. They don't understand digitization very well, and perhaps because of that, this whole AI thing is like, if they could, they would not try. They would try to like sort of not be involved with it. But because it's all over the place, of course, you sort of like try to use it. And I think the biggest use case is what, like writing emails or so, or like being your therapist. That's really what the use cases are. But I think it really comes down to philosophy and mentality. And I think apart from Mistral, I don't know, there's not any single European model that really can compete. And even Mistral, I think, is lagging quite a bit behind every other model.
Really good that you mentioned all that, Chris, because I'm next week in Germany, and now you remind me, okay, I need to not only bring physical cards because likely sometimes tapping with your phone might not work, but also I need to consider how to have cash with me, right? So like some things that you're no longer used to, you realize how in some countries it is very different, and that plays out exactly like you're saying. So with all the AI regulation, non-regulation, IDOTs, and so on, where yes, I see why the EU has an interest in being this regulatory superpower. But at the same time, we've seen cases, right? So where, for example, Meta and so on, they delay the release of specific models or specific features that are AI powered because they say they don't want to comply with the regulation or is not friendly towards them. So you could argue, yes, maybe it is maybe with good intentions, but then considering that it's also becoming a smaller market, then as a result, it is less interesting for vendors that be there present, right? And then, so here in the US, you have all these America First attitude and so on, and minimal red tape. And for an industry that is still in so development where things are happening very fast, that's of course highly attractive, right? So you see now when we discuss this topic of like maths and so on in AI, how although sometimes we think that we are like slowing down, that things are getting stale, actually so many things are happening so fast, and trying to comply with some regulatory restrictions is just not something that the industry want to do. Even if you think that long term that will protect us from killing robots, this is not what they want.
I think the philosophy is an interesting one, right? Because in Europe and the UK, you still have a lot of the research power, e.g., knowledge, but it sounds like we're not, fully capitalizing on those knowledge, or I would say maybe capitalizing is a wrong word, but utilizing those knowledge or implementing those knowledge properly. And simply because there are just more rate tapes for people to experiment, to build even. Whereas the US is basically taking a, you know what, let's go for it. What's the worst can happen? We can always roll back, right? And even by the end of it, the world would be using AI anyway. So we might as well be the leader in AI. But the European, it feels like they're playing a more of a defensive move, right? It's like we don't have AI here, therefore, we want to regulate any sort of AI coming in. But I think that it's counter to what they want to achieve, right? The better way would be to fight the fire with fire, in my mind at the very least, which is to let the AI models develop from Europe. So you have something that you can compete. I don't know, restricting it just doesn't quite feel right. At least not in my head. Now, if Meta is delaying their models here, which means there are going to be less ability for people to even experiment with it. Hence, probably slow down the cycle quite a bit.
And it is as you're saying, Max. So we're so you just reflecting on. We were talking last week on this idea. Not this idea was happening with top researchers getting offers from, for example, Meta for like 100 million, 200 million dollars. Which European company can afford or even have a structure for that, right? So in most large European companies, what happens is that there is this hierarchy, and the manager has to earn more than so the person below and so on. So you have these so very verticalized. So here org chart, and it's inconceivable that some IC who is a specialist somewhere very deep in the organization will be paid orders of magnitude more than the CEO of like a large German publicly traded company. And if this is the market where top talent are receiving top dollars, then one, even though Europe has the research centers, has the PhD students and so on, they are not able to keep them. And two, for those who are talented, they say, hey, why do I stay here? I just go to the US and I'll get paid vast amounts of money for the same work.
Yeah, I think the same story actually play out in financial services, or let's say investment banking. Top five investment banks, they pay their CEOs, their top talent way more than the sixth bank, than the seventh bank, right? Because the sixth bank, seventh bank are basically the two European investment banks that still exist. But then the payment, it's colloquially known as not great, especially when you're a top talent, right? When you're entry level, you're roughly the same, so you don't feel it. But the moment you get to like the top talent, like which are the key researchers that truly matters, it's really really hard to compete on payment. And you, as a result, you just see giant brain drain from those companies over. Um, I think that's one. And then the second thing, anecdotally within the finance world, is that the younger investment bankers are also trying to take on PE roles outside of their existing investment banking roles, right? So they basically predate some of the hiring, and that is also again a function of money. If we don't have the right, I would say, capital, it's probably hard to attract some of the right folks. The economics doesn't work, especially for those who are ambitious. Moving on to the next segment. So on the next segment, I think I want to spend a little bit of time, just to talk about, I guess, the AI, both ChatGPT 4.5 and Gemini Ultra, working through Olympiad Mets. It's reported that, OpenAI and Google just beat top human mathlete, if that's a name. They solved 5 out of 6 Olympiad problems with no fine tuning whatsoever, to be able to get there. I think to me that's very interesting, because fundamentally a lot of things that we do in what we have today are computation, which means they're mathematics. So if you're able to get AI there on the fundamental level, basically you could potentially change what is being built on top of it. And for me, it's super interesting, right? There are a lot of things that even if I do on my daily life, I feel like, man, we should really just let AI do this. Um, and I can tell you, even my boss is telling me, right, like, you shouldn't be doing this now. You should let AI do it. It's like, great, sounds fun to me. Wanted to get both your thoughts on this, right? Where do we go from here now that I'm beating Mets Olympiad? I am excited. So maybe maybe Chris.
Yeah, really, Max? You're excited? I don't know. I feel like it's a bit of a, I mean, a natural path. No, it doesn't surprise me whatsoever. I mean, actually, what surprised me quite a bit was I know in the early days, like what, a couple of months ago, maybe a year when we did our show, ChatGPT was not able to do 1+1, right? And then something weird came out, and like 3 came out or whatnot. So it was really bad in sort of like the logical deterministic problem sets, and it was better in creating stories and copy and whatnot. But then again, you have this branch of research that goes into the realm of AlphaGo, AlphaZero, that play Go against masters, or I think AlphaZero even more impressively taught itself how to play chess, and then was able to compete and win against Stockfish, the current sort of like virtual AI artificial brain that actually learned very differently. And Stockfish actually learned chess by looking at grandmasters games and then learned how to move. But AlphaZero at the time was basically just learning the rules and played against each other, against themselves, to then play millions of games to really understand the logic behind chess. And the reason it doesn't surprise me is because at the end of the day, there are so many. I mean, you have a fixed set of rules, so you have a fixed numbers of deterministic possibilities. Yes, the possibilities are really vast, and obviously we talk about millions and millions that you can move once you start, the first move of chess. And so it's very similarly. I actually think that like math problems tend to be of the same nature. So I think that to me is almost like just a consequence of the development that we already see in AGI and in model development. I think for me, the second takeaway of this article around Olympiads, etc., is actually of a very different nature. I mean, it was Gemini and OpenAI winning the competition. And I think from a Google point of view, I mean, we spoke about their core business being attacked, right? We spoke about the search field now being disrupted by all these big companies trying to take search away. And, of course, if you were to like look for shoes now on ChatGPT, you would also get like some links to like shopping websites. And I think we can also see the hesitance maybe in the stock market here as well, where you see the Google stock going a bit down. People are not sure if the core model can actually still exist. But what I find very interesting here is, again, Google's way of innovating and how they are still capable of staying on top of these type of developments as well. Gemini being so powerful nonetheless, and they are actively playing in that field. Also, given all the rhetoric that we heard around talent wars and getting poached away with X millions of bonuses, whatnot, still, and yet they're able to retain a core talent pool of people that are able to innovate, despite the fact that Google is such a gigantic company now. And I think that is remarkable to me when I read this article.
I like to hear, take a step back for those who are not deep in the weeds of what happened. So there is a international math Olympiad happening, I guess, every year, where each country sends teams, and these teams consist of basically like, so 5 participants and a captain, and they are given a set of math problems that are chosen also by like a pool of organizers around the world, and they're given a time limit how to solve these problems. And these problems are not something where, let's say, in theory, you just need high school level maths to solve it. But at the same time, if you read the problems, this is not something that even a PhD mathematician can, so from the get-go, start solving them and getting good results. So it's very similar. For example, you have this also with like coding. There are all these lead code and professional coding competitions that have no really connections with how programmers work in real life, but one can train for that and one can get really good at that. And here it happened a little bit maybe what you were saying, Chris, with chess, in that you remember like in the 90s and so on, there was all this about IBM Deep Blue was the name versus Gary Kasparov and so on. And it was the first time that a computer beat like a chess master and something like this. And this is basically something similar in that regard, where you could say is the first time that you have pure LLM models getting great results, because before they were already in these competitions and the results were rather mediocre. And not only that, but also that they did it more or less within the constraints of the competition. And here are some caveats. So first, what happened was that OpenAI did not participate formally in the competition. So you have here two announcements from DeepMind from Google, and also here OpenAI. And OpenAI, they just announced, yeah, we got the same results, but they were not part of the competition. And they say that they coordinated with organizers. So this is not something that is just like a PR stunt. That is, there is some backing behind that. But at the same time, it is unclear. For example, there's this known mathematician, Terence Tao, and he was arguing that yes, one can get those results, but there can be things that we do not see how OpenAI structured, let's say, the problem constraint, in that, for example, is different if, let's say, you can get from participants, so in this case, AIs, different results for the same problem, and then have like an AI decide which one is the best to submit and so on. So you can basically modify the competition that from the outside, it looks, yes, we're solving the same problems as a human competitor. Yes, we have the same constraints that we're having, but when you look deep down, you can modify it in ways where the AI outperforms. There's this one thing. The other thing was that the organizers, they ask, let's wait 1 week to announce the results. Let's celebrate the here human participants. And then OpenAI didn't respect that, and they just announced that. And then people were saying, yeah, this is just pure PR. On the Google side, they try to follow here the rules. They were like a formal participants. And here, what is also interesting from their side is that historically they were using classic like computing techniques for this. And this is the first time that they use just like pure AI approach. But I go back to your point, Chris, in that it's a question in the yes, just like we have now programs that they just play chess for us and so on, we likely have this for mathematics. But the question is, does this translate for better research? Does this also help for new products and so on? This is like a separate question, because there's here something interesting. The problems that they could solve all these AIs, they are rather considered problems that can be solved with known techniques. And there were 5 categories there are total 6 categories. 5 are like known techniques. The AI could solve that. There's a 6th category that is for creativity. And that's where all struggled. And this shows you that maybe when it comes down to be creative, humans have here the advantage.
Yeah, talking about that, I think Chris, you asked why am I so excited about it? Because I have a lot of friends when I was younger that they're really like Olympiad maths gods. I see them as gods. To me, it's quite interesting to see some of the capabilities that as humans that we have excelled on that AI could take on. And it's really pushing the boundaries. Then the question becomes, how does it, I guess, at least in my head, right? Where should I would say the younger generation be spending their time, even in high school? Is it doing maths? Is it doing the creativity stuff? The second thing that comes to mind, I think, is around Rod. Your comment around the application, just because they've been able to solve math, is it able to do the real corporate R&D/innovation and create real value in the market? I think it will still require some sort of human to get involved in pulling those strings together, being able to at least take a more creative approach to the raw power of solving some of these mathematical problems. So at least that's something in my head. And the other thing that is interesting from there is I think it was yesterday or the day before, Rod and Chris, both of you, I think, shared a future job reports on like what are the jobs that is most vulnerable to AI replacement. And I genuinely felt that it's pretty accurate. A lot of the things are I would say replaceable. And I'm also trying to think about the nature of jobs going forward will probably be very different, because there are a lot of things that I spend my time doing today that you could really just automate it in a few months or years. And the job market, even if you do the same role, would be very different. Just like how internet really changed all the knowledge workers' job previously. At least that's how I'm seeing this. Great. Moving on to the next segment. I think this is something that I want to spend a little bit of time on, which is on, I guess, the Apple's AI strategy. I think Apple came out and basically push out a little bit of the AI I would say what you call it features. They push it out a little bit to 2026, compared to some of their competitors, which are constantly announcing new things. I don't know if you like, let's say, for example, Google. Google has like this new search thing, AI, Google AI search or something. I don't know if you guys try it. Pretty cool. But at the same time, like Facebook, even on your WhatsApp now, you have an AI thing that you can ask questions. It's not, I don't know how super helpful they are at the moment, but they are releasing quite a few of those features. Whereas on Apple, it feels like they're trying to delay a little bit some of the features because of reliability problems that they have in mind. I take it they didn't want to have another Grok episode. So let's to get both your thoughts, right? Like in this current environment, is actually taking the late to market a smarter move, given that there are just so many announcements all the time. Given their distribution and their known ability to design and even their brand, if you will, is it I guess the right approach for them?
So last week when we were talking about Apple and discussing, hey, should they buy Perplexity? So this AI search engine as a way to get ahead in the AI race. We're saying yes. So like they need to come up with something. But at the same time, I'm thinking, and then as from a consumer perspective, what's the alternative, right? So it's like, are we supposed to now all buy Android phones just because Google has better AI? I do not see that happening. I do not see people switching from Apple devices to here Android. And then if you look at, for example, as well as so here consumer, so laptops and desktops and so on, this is pretty much like a stale market, right? So people, they just buy a new one to replace the old one. But I do not see here a large migration on all these AI first laptops that they've been now already for a while, right? Like Intel, AMD, and others. They've been releasing all these AI chips that you've been seeing, especially like in for like high end Windows manufacturers, Lenovo, similar, that they have some local AI functionality out of the box. And nevertheless, you do not hear that they are, let's say, like crushing it, and all of a sudden people are flipping from Apple devices so here to like a Dell or a Lenovo or whatnot. And if you think more on here, like from a company perspective, so compute and so on, well, Apple has never been in the space on so selling you compute, selling GPUs, or selling you like AI service. So here is really more about making the life of users easier. In, for example, adding that when you're editing a photo, you can remove the person in the background, this type of functionality. And there slowly, I've seen that, yeah, this type of feature is slowly appearing. So in some sense, it's not necessarily what people expect. People expect here to have like a very advanced Siri, but also it's not like they're not just doing nothing. How do you see that, Chris? I mean, are you switching now to Android devices just because there is no AI on an iOS?
No, I wouldn't. I don't really care, but I think I'm also not necessarily the person who should ask. But actually, guys, I think it's very simple, right? I mean, they are dominating a certain interface. I mean, we speak about interfaces quite a bit, and they do have the real estate and the attention. Either, I mean, I'm talking to you guys now from a MacBook, right? And I have an iPhone, etc. So they've been really strong in creating this ecosystem that we also spoke about last time. Um, I think the article actually argues that it's a good strategy maybe to wait a little bit, and I think that I can see it makes sense because first of all, the models get better and better and better and better. So I think they're just waiting for maybe even a more powerful, maybe AGI-like type of model. I think the second thing is we also seen how freaking expensive it is to develop models, to run models, to power models, right? So I think maybe they're just smart and say, okay, well, why don't we let the others compete with each other, and then we'll just find a way to partner with one of them. And yes, that's going to be a very expensive partnership, but nonetheless, maybe even still cheaper than going into that very competitive market and very expensive market of trying to build something themselves. So I believe they do have this type of brand power. They do have the interface, and all the people will not run away tomorrow. If at all, yes, maybe you will have lost a couple of them, because I don't think necessarily because of AI, but maybe because for a long time already, buying an Apple product doesn't feel like wow anymore, right? Like, I don't know. I get my iPhone, I think it's very expensive. I'm like, okay, well, it's just a utility tool. So I believe there might be a chunk of people, anyways, who are considering to switch. But I think there are also these hardcore Apple users that will not switch, and I think that's the majority of it. Or at least that's my hypothesis. And so you can actually, as Apple, do quite a bit with that interface, and that's really the asset you have, and that is not going to change. So I do believe that there's some consideration on why rush it if you can also wait it out a little bit further and then really shop around to see what can work for you.
I agree with you, Chris. I think that, so if I think what's next in terms of like devices, I do not know. Like maybe voice is the next interface. I see like a lot of people that are talking with ChatGPT just pure by voice and not typing at all. And then, yeah, so if this becomes like the default interface of the future, then Apple might need to rethink, because then we don't need a phone anymore. It can be just some brick that you're talking to, and no screen. But right now, as it looks, I do not see what's the alternative, right? Like, yeah, like who wants to buy these days an Android phone? Maybe more like budget conscious users. But even you see, like in the US, so I'm also very surprised on how uh, historically, so Android had larger market shares in the US, also like in Germany. Germany was like an Android land. But these days, actually, iOS is a larger, has a larger share of the market in, for example, Germany, than it used to have like 5, 10 years ago.
Fascinating. I think a couple of things come to mind when based on both your comments. First one is, I guess, what comes to mind was brands are hard to build, or trusts are hard to build and easy to lose. There's no reason to rush and then get into a little bit of a grok episode, right? Like if you're such an established incumbent in a way. So that's one. The second thing I think on the AI side is that I think exactly to your point, Chris, which is by connecting all this different ecosystem, you're so locked in, and your ability to innovate within it, to push new things within the ecosystem, it's only going to become stronger and stronger. And I think it's also playing back into what Apple traditionally is good at. I think sometimes people forget that like Apple was not the first one who come up with like um uh the mouse, for example, right? They weren't the first one to come up with I would say it's a screen what you call it, a keyboardless phone per se. They're also not the first one to think about like the tablets, if you will, right? So they are just extremely good at taking what's out there and then turning into a very, very good consumer facing products. And I suspect this is probably back to what they were doing before, which is to focus on how to create that great product. Um, I think always reminds me of what Steve Jobs likes to say, right? That good artists copies, great artist steals. And I guess this might just be the case. Cool, but well, they didn't do them very well on the stock price. But I suspect it might come when they release the next big thing. I guess one last thing. I think Chris, you shared an interesting report, which I somehow think of you remiss for not including it, but we can talk more in details in the future episode. Which just wanted to, I guess, preview it maybe. So it's a report on state of AI in China, which I find really interesting. I was reading it yesterday, but somehow didn't get a chance to include it. But some of the key things would be, China is not that far away from AI. It's probably affecting how US is approaching their AI strategy. Basically, push for, I don't know, 25 billion of AI revenue from the US. So I find that super interesting. But I think just wanted to flag that maybe we'll dive deeper in the coming episode. With that, I think first off, thank you so much, everyone, for listening in. We enjoyed doing this today. We cover a few topics, as we normally do. We talk a little bit about Stargate, spend a little bit time talking about the US deregulation playbook versus the compliance EU AI code, and then we spend a little bit of time talking about some of the how AI models are winning at Olympiad. What does that probably mean for us and in the future? And lastly, just trying to, I guess, spend a little bit of time talking about Apple. Playing it slow with AI may not be such a bad strategy for Apple. And with that, thank you very much for dialing in. This is it's a battleground in AI, and we always want to bring you the latest and the greatest on the AI news. And remember to subscribe if you like what you hear. And you can find us on @ChrisRodMax on Twitter, YouTube, I believe, Instagram as well. Let us know if you have any comments.